Okie dokie. Well, Emily's getting her stuff. Leilani is here.
Yes. Here's Emily.
And I'm hoping more people just join later. But now that it's recording, it's good. Like anybody that wanted to come, I can give them the recording.
Cool.
So this is going to be like a webinar where I'm going to kind of be presenting a presentation. As people were coming in the room, I had a music video, well, not a music video, but a performance playing. And the reason for that particular song is because it was performed when Saturn was in Pisces in the 1960s. And so Emily and Leilani, you were here when it was playing. I think that you were able to see it. But when it was playing, there's a lot of symbolism in that performance that is pretty much on brand with Saturn and Pisces. So I don't know if you saw, but there was a lot of vibrancy of color. And I don't know if you all know the lyrics of that particular song, but it's called Sympathy for the Devil. And it's the Rolling Stones performing about a couple different things going on in the world that are controversial. So in general, like I believe that this Saturn and Pisces is going to continue on with that type of vibe. We're going to visit also other musicians that came up during Saturn and Pisces to kind of illustrate what it's like to live during a time when Saturn is in Pisces. And so music is a really great tool to use when you're learning something new like astrology, because luckily we all listen to music, we all enjoy it. And so I picked certain artists through this presentation that I'm going to present to you all that came up during the time of Saturn and Pisces, and hopefully we can kind of together like come up with a way to describe these bands and the message behind their song. Because this is a question for people in the webinar right now, but what do good musicians do? And if you want to answer, go ahead, but I have an answer, but I just am curious, like what do good musicians do? I'll just go ahead and answer, no worries. They send a message to society in song form. And so as you'll see, these two particular bands that I picked, the pull of Saturn, when Saturn is in Pisces, it's very, very interesting to listen to their lyrics and to hear what they're actually singing about, because it's not just rainbows and sprinkles. It's like real shit going on. The Rolling Stones are singing about how governments are creating war and, the assassination of John F. Kennedy and all this stuff. And while we're watching that performance, they're in a backdrop that's a circus. And there's a lot of color there. And he's talking about Lucifer and Jesus, and religion is brought up, and people are on drugs, and like you see John Lennon there, they're all partying and they're really getting into like the whole the whole performance. And it's probably one of my favorite things to watch, just because there's so much there and it's really in your face. And the thing about the Rolling Stones, and I'll show you in the presentation, but they formed when Saturn was in Aquarius, and they really came up when Saturn was in Pisces. And that's exactly where we're at in the collective right now in 2023. Today we just transitioned from Saturn in Aquarius to Saturn in Pisces. So there might be more of that type of moxie and that gusto that they have And I think that it's our generations that is going to show that this time finally, because back in the 60s we weren't even a twinkle in our parents' eyes. In the 90s we were like in diapers, and then now it's our time to kind of really take a stance on the society. So my generation, the people born in the early 1990s, just finished their first Saturn return. Think about when Saturn went into Aquarius. It was back in March 2020. What was going on then? Everything went online, Zoom parties, and Aquarius rules technology. So think about how crazy that is. It was restricted socialization over Zoom. That's when all those, I mean, I went to a Zoom bridal shower in 2020, and I never had done that before. But that was like something that we adopted because of the pandemic. And so Saturn rules restriction. And so what we're going to see now that Saturn is in Pisces, where are we going to see the restriction? Are we going to see it with religion? Is religion going to have another rise? Is the war on drugs going to be different? Are we like pharmaceuticals are going to get maybe into psychedelic drugs? Like they might like actually put funding behind, how like marijuana is now legalized. That might be the next thing that pharmaceuticals might do. So maybe we will see that in Saturn and Pisces, because Pisces rules over actually addiction. So it's going to be a very interesting time frame. This is going to be a two and a half year time frame. When we had Saturn in Aquarius, we saw a lot of humanitarian efforts come up. I mean, George Floyd, all that was going on during Saturn in Aquarius. We also saw a lot of advancements in health. So we got the vaccines during Saturn in Aquarius. And more things were going on, especially on technology. For instance, Donald Trump was banned from Twitter. There was restriction on social media. We had never seen that before. Now we had Elon Musk just bought Twitter, and the blue verified check mark. Like, we're now figuring out that Instagram is allowing people to buy into that. So is that blue check mark on social media really going to mean anything as we go into Saturn and Pisces? To me, I'll be honest with you, I think that is going to totally change the influencer game and all that stuff. It will all change that. And I think that, all these other social media platforms are kind of coming up. Maybe we will lose sight of, getting on Instagram and really enjoying it, because maybe it will change so much, the landscape will change. But as you can tell, just some of the things that I brought up just now, there was a lot of restriction, a lot of change, and Saturn has the ability to do that. It has a strong pull on society, but it has an even stronger pull on the people that have natal Saturns in the particular sign it's transiting. So that was a lot there, a lot of words there. But basically what that means, it's going to be more of a pull on you if you have Saturn in Pisces in your natal astrology birth chart, which I know Madeline has it. We've been talking a lot about it. She's new to my community, but she's an amazing individual. She's a Sagittarius and she's here. But we've been talking a lot about what is that going to mean for her. But basically, we're going to talk more about this. But before I do that, I want to celebrate the fact that I'm done with my Saturn return. Okay, like this was a big old. This was a big milestone. And when I started my Saturn return, I popped bubbly with my mom. And so now that it's over, I'm doing the exact same thing. And what I can say, those were some blackberries, by the way. What I can say is it was a huge milestone. I learned a lot. I got white hairs and I'm still standing and I feel more wise. I feel more confident. I feel more mature. And honestly, if you're getting to the point where you know that you're about to go through your Saturn return and it kind of is freaking you out, what I want you to do, and we're going to do this together, is I want you to close your eyes and I want you to think of the wisest person you've ever met in your entire life. And I want you to give a visual to that person and really paint a picture here and let their voice come alive in your head. What do they say that's so wise? And kind of let that mantra that they keep saying, like, let it repeat in your head. And I want you to use this when you get freaked out during your Saturn return, because it is like an old wise person, this Saturn return. And it is the person that is like the one person in your life that is always telling you the right things to do. And I want you to use this little technique, this little ritual when things get tough, because it will get tough in a Saturn return. If you play your cards right, it's a big upgrade to your life. But if you don't, Saturn will slap you silly and it will be kind of a rude awakening. But it's all for, a good reason. And Saturn isn't going to give you anything that you can't handle. So we're going to cheers to that. And then we're going to go ahead and start the little presentation that I prepared for you all. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and share this keynote that I have on Canva. So if you can't see it, let me know. I hope you can. Can everyone see it? And I can see me too. Okay, perfect. Okay, so I have to tell you that I am a big fan of subtle things, and I like if people pick up on it. So I don't know if you saw, but I made a post about just looking in the mirror, and it was around Christmas. And Instagram actually took it down because I was talking about drugs like cocaine and all that stuff. And I'll be honest with you, like have been no angel. I have gone down the path. I've done a lot of drugs, and we'll kind of talk about that just because Pisces does deal with addiction. And since Saturn has moved into Pisces and we're in the sun season of Pisces, we will touch on that. But this picture and that post was about mirror work. And I don't know if anybody has attempted to do that in the room, but mirror work is a really powerful method to get real with yourself. And a Saturn return is probably one of the realest moments that you will go through in a lifetime. It's really like where you draw the line in the sand. So the whole aesthetic here is black. And the reason for that is because Saturn rules the color black. So I have my same ensemble on that I had in this picture. And then we have, just the kind of that fact that like it's kind of moving and that we have to move with a Saturn return. We cannot resist it. We cannot fight it because you're not going to win. It will, like I said, kind of slap you silly. So we just have to kind of go with it. So that's kind of the reasoning behind the aesthetic. Also, you've probably been seeing or hearing the music that I've been selecting. I've been doing that on purpose. And I talked a little bit about it. And it's because the Rolling Stones really reached their top of fame during Saturn in Pisces. That's when they were like mainstream and they were like really, really known throughout the entire world, but they formed that craft during Saturn in Aquarius. So anyway, this is a little bit of a background on the event tonight. This is my first live webinar. I've never had a live webinar. I've had a panel before for my course on death and dying, but this is the first like live webinar where I invite people that want to just talk astrology, want to participate like you two are doing right now, and for people that want to watch the replay. And also, if you can't stay the entire time, that's totally fine. I'm not going to take offense to that. I understand we all live busy lives. So if you want to just pop in, that's totally fine. And I'm allowing people to do that as we go on. So people might join as I continue. So just don't be, I don't know what the word is. We're just going to keep on moving, but don't be surprised if more people come in and come in and leave. It's totally okay. This is, like I was saying on my Instagram, it's not like a typical school. Like I never really was fond of all the rules in school. So I like to keep my type of things very carefree, laissez-faire, all that stuff. So earlier this morning, around like 8:30, Saturn finally moved from 29 degrees Aquarius to 0 degrees Pisces. So we're starting that journey in Pisces right now. And yeah, it feels really good to pass on the baton. But I would have to say, as a Capricorn stellium, I have a Capricorn rising, Capricorn Uranus, Capricorn Neptune, Capricorn North Node, and yeah, and so yeah, that's what I have. But it's four points or 4 planets that are in Capricorn, so it is called a stellium. I liked my Saturn return. I loved it. The entire time I was like, let the change keep on coming in because I'm ready for a new flavor in life. So I really welcomed it and I loved it. And so in a way, I mean, I'm excited for the people that are about to go through their Saturn return. Like if you're afraid to go through your Saturn return, you are with the right person because I'm going to tell you the ins and outs of it and I'm going to get you kind of excited because your life will change and that's cool. Anyway, this is more about me. I am the owner of Ruby Jade Rituals. This is a company I created back in May of 2020. So it was when Saturn was in Aquarius, when I was going through my Saturn return. And the whole mission of my company is to guide people through life's ups and downs. And obviously a Saturn return is one of those things. I really want people to come home to themselves and be excited about themselves. So the whole idea is to kind of be there for people, like even when shit is tough. I'm totally that type of friend. I am totally that type of aunt, that type of sibling, that type of partner where I really, and I don't mean to toot my own horn, but I really thrive in tough situations, and I don't know why that is, but I really like being there for people when it's tough. So that was the idea back in 2020 of May. It hasn't really changed. And so now we're going to get into the real topic of tonight, which is Saturn and the Saturn return. So I have 2 visuals up on the screen, and on the on my left hand side, it's the Saturn and Aquarius generations, and on the right-hand side, it's the Saturn and Pisces generations. As you can see, I've listed from the 1930s all the way to now, and I did that because there's still some people living that are alive that were born back in the 1930s. None of my grandparents are. Some of them are maybe in the background, maybe you can see them. But yeah, it's really interesting to think that like what was it like for them and for the adults living then. And I really like to think about that because that's when my grandparents were like growing up, and those were my parents' parents. So whatever was going on in their household back then affected the way that my grandparents grew up, affected the way that they parented my parents, which then consequently affected the way I was parented. I talk a lot about intergenerational trauma. I believe in it. And so this is something that I probably will kind of dive a little bit deeper on. In the 60s, there was also a time frame where, Saturn was in Aquarius and Pisces, and we talked a little bit about that. Now, it's funny because that's actually like when my dad was growing up, he was a teenager. So he would be really happy to know that I'm having a webinar and I'm playing the Rolling Stones because that was the music that he was like living in. Like he was living in that hippie movement, which is kind of cool to think about because back then it was just from his stories, it was just like they went from the 1950s in America where it was so strict, and then the 1960s and like into the 70s, it was so free. It was like night and day. And it was because he was saying that like he explained to me that like growing up, like everybody that was in that hippie movement that like started that movement was like, we're tired of these rules, like we're not gonna do this anymore. And that's like when that rebellion started. And the bands like the Rolling Stones, they fueled that. They were in your face and they were saying things that were like inappropriate. And it was like, fuck yeah, like let's go, like let's not like listen to the rules anymore. And that is Aquarius energy. It's rebellious. And that is when they started to form. And then once they formed their craft and they went into Saturn and Pisces, I mean, they really could get into our psyches and talk about some stuff that was really tough that we were all feeling. Obviously, we weren't alive for all that stuff, but there was a lot of assassinations, a lot of wars, a lot of things that were going wrong. And society still wasn't so progressed as it is now. Because now we're in 2020s, we're in the 2020s, and we have things that people in the 1960s did not have. We still want to progress further, but like nowadays, LGBTQ is like for sure, like we don't like our generation, like I feel like does not have an issue with that. I know that there are groups that are like that, but for the most part, like we accept that. And back then it wasn't like that. So we're still progressing and there's things that are still going to go on. But I feel like we also are living in a really cool time because women are on the rise for sure. Just the style of management is way more feminine than it ever was. In the 1960s, it was very masculine. It's the divine feminine is on the rise, and it's been on the rise since I would say like 2015. Like I feel like that's kind of when like work like that I do right now like started to really kind of make a wave, and it's going to continue to do that. Like just think about all the people interested in practices like astrology. It's just going to continue. It's going to get more and more and more. So we have a lot to look forward to actually. And so let's kind of go through the theme of tonight. So the theme of tonight is, Saturn's pull on society. And so the thing that the Rolling Stones and Nirvana have in common, because I'm going to showcase both of these bands in tonight's webinar, is that they formed and they came up during the time when Saturn was in Aquarius and then transitioned into Pisces. And I've been saying that a lot, but I'm going to tell you right now that the next two slides that I show you, it's going to be kind of like, wow, like there was a lot of shit going on. And I'm going to point out where, Aquarius shines through a little bit and Pisces shine through. But just remember, Saturn is the Lord of karma. And it's a taskmaster, and there's restriction there, and it showcases where we are weak. So taking a Saturn return and zooming out and thinking about how Saturn actually how Saturn pulls on society as a whole and what people are talking about. I want you to look at these next two slides with that mentality, because what I want you to pick up on is what happened like with these bands and the members of these bands. um who were they like surpassing in Billboard charts, and also what were they singing about. And we're going to kind of dissect that, but I hope that with just kind of going into it with that type of frame of mind, you're going to start to like on your own put the pieces together of what it actually means to live in a Saturn and Aquarius generation or a Saturn and Pisces generation. Because, you know, both of them are very interesting signs. They're kind of older signs. When we get over to Capricorn, Aquarius, and Pisces, those are the oldest signs of the zodiac. So if you think about like old people in general, are they concerned about stuff that like doesn't matter? Absolutely not. No. We're concerned about real shit. And some of the things that they spoke about in their songs are like, that's why I like these bands, because they don't talk about like random stuff. Like they talk about real shit. So moving on, this is the Rolling Stones. Okay, so the Rolling Stones formed in 1962. And in 1962 was Saturn and Aquarius. The British invasion of the United States happened in 1964, and by a landslide, the Rolling Stones beat the Beatles as number one in the UK in two band surveys around this time. So the Beatles were obviously really great. However, the Rolling Stones had a different oomph to them. They were more in your face. And I would have to pay that to the fact that they came up in Saturn in Aquarius, which it was, and when Saturn is in Aquarius, a lot of humanitarian things come up. People stand up for what is right. So during George Floyd's protests and the Breonna Taylor protests and all the other Black people that were killed like in 2020, and it was an obscene amount, and it's still happening, obviously. But those protests happened when Saturn was in Aquarius. And so when the Rolling Stones were like coming up, there was a lot going on with, the Vietnam War that was going on. There was also, just the fact that people were starting to use drugs and they were being open about it. And that was kind of a thing that, was new, because before that, like that was probably going on, but it was very hush hush. This band was in your face with it. Like they didn't care, which I kind of love. Like that's probably my favorite thing about them in general, is like they just did what they wanted to do. There were no rules, and Aquarius hates rules. So anyway, as the band progresses, the height of their fame lasts between the years of 1965 to 1967. That's when Saturn is in Pisces. You have I Can't Get No Satisfaction in 1965, Painted Black in 1966. And then in 1967, two members of the band get arrested for possession of illicit drugs in their own home. So I don't know how they get arrested in their own home, but they do, and they go to jail. And that sparks a huge debate on, privacy of the home and just drugs in general. I don't really think it was fair, but that's just me. Okay, moving on to the 1990s. So let's just say, the 70s go, we got disco, we have Donna Summer, we got the 80s, we have Michael Jackson, and now the 90s come up, and it's back to Saturn and Aquarius, and then slowly but surely we move into Saturn and Pisces 2.5 years later, and Nirvana's here. So I'm born in 1991, so like I listened to this music, but at the same time I wasn't alive like when it was like mainstream. So they released their first single in 1988. Saturn is in Capricorn at this time. They released their first album in 1989. In 1990, the group began recording the album Nevermind, still Saturn and Capricorn here, But this album is what led to their mainstream breakthrough. And in 1991, the year that I'm born, they performed their first live uh, performance on television on MTV, and they sung they sung the song "Smells Like Teen Spirit." And I don't know if anybody knows what that song is about, but Kurt Cobain was very, very, I mean, talk about somebody that really absorbs like the energy of society. He wrote about how like youth was like losing it. And that's kind of what the song is about. And that his hope for the youth was like declining. And so it's kind of interesting because when we look back in the 1960s, the Rolling Stones are talking about, every cop is a criminal, and, the bombs that are being dropped in Bombay are from the people in the United States, and like all this stuff. And the lyrics are extremely clever, very creative, but they're talking about and they're putting politicians and people of high power on blast. Now, Nirvana is talking about the youth and how the youth was kind of like losing themselves. And I mean, it was kind of like it was like a grungy type of vibe. Also, like I think about like Columbine shootings was kind of going around this time as well. So maybe it has something to do with that. Not really sure, but it was kind of like a somber, dark vibe, Nirvana. In 1992, they surpassed Michael Jackson on the Billboard charts, so they're really gaining a lot of momentum. This is Saturn and Pisces. In 1993, they put out a single, Puss and Oh the Guilt, with the Jesus Lizard. You can't make this up. The fact that they combined efforts with this person called the Jesus Lizard. Pisces is all about like spirituality. Religion sometimes has a rise when there's like Pisces energy. So this Jesus Lizard, when I saw that, I was like, wow. But then during 1994, Kurt Cobain attempted suicide. He relapsed and got back into heroin, and he eventually killed himself. And what's the craziest thing is that he was born in 1967 when Saturn was in Pisces, and he died in 1994 when Saturn was in Pisces. And he killed himself. So it's just kind of wild, like when you kind of look at that and you take a step back. Kurt Cobain, like, I think that the fame was too much for him, but I also think he was a very like type of person that really absorbs like everything that was going on, and it just got too much. So rest in peace to him. Like, he was very talented, but really, really sad that that happened. But Saturn at times is really challenging, and sometimes people want to run away from really, really tough times. And that's why it's really important when you're going through your Saturn return to kind of just try to see it through and understand that, like this board says on this slide, it says difficult roads lead to beautiful destinations. And you kind of have to just be patient in a Saturn return. You have to realize that there is going to be a lot of discipline. You're going to have a lot of responsibility, maturity, rules. There's going to be up leveling. You're going to learn life lessons. There's going to be some hard truths. You're going to have some like realizations that you've never had before. But you want to be really patient. You want to have endurance. You want to conserve your energy, because it's not like just a day. It's not a day. It's a 2.5 period. So you're starting today, and in 2026 you'll be out of it. So that's why you have to conserve your energy. It's not like a sprint. It's definitely a long distance type of race. So you have to do your best at the very end of the race, not at the beginning. You're just learning right now. And that's really what I felt like towards the end of Saturn being in Aquarius. I just felt like things were smoother for me, and I could handle situations way better than I was doing it back in March 2020. And it has to be because of this Saturn return. So, any questions so far as we move on to the next slide about more about Saturn return? Are we all understanding that Saturn kind of gives off this like strict dad in high school vibe? Everyone picking up on that? Okay, good, because that's exactly what's going on. And that's something that, at times, like, my dad was really strict and I always was kind of annoyed by it. But like looking back, I'm really happy that I had a dad like that because I'm responsible. I get shit done. And that's what Saturn wants you to do. They want to Saturn wants to reward you when you put hard work in. But if you're going to try to take like a shortcut, it's like, nope, start again. Go back to square one. So anyway, when does your Saturn return happen? So I use Placidus. Placidus is on a metric where each planet goes through each sign in the zodiac from 0 degrees to 29 degrees. So it goes through all of those degrees. It doesn't go to degree 30. That would be a whole sign. I don't use whole sign. But a lot of people do. I just like Placidus. It's more detailed, and we have the full moon in Virgo, and Virgo loves details. I was an accountant. I like details, and so I use Placidus. So a Saturn return happens when Saturn returns to the exact degree and minute you were born. And I can show you that if you have a chart and it's in Placidus. I can do that really quickly for you. A lot of people have been messaging me and they're like, today is my Saturn return. And I'm like, it's the beginning. It might not necessarily be your peak, but it's definitely the beginning. And the way to look at your peak is to use a software system like I use and to get, and to see the date where Saturn is at 0 degrees and 32 minutes of Aquarius. That's mine. So when that happened, my peak, even though my birthday is on October 25th in 1991, my peak in my Saturn return was actually on December 21st, 2020. And Saturn had gone into Aquarius back in March. So it took a little bit of time in 2020 for me to get to my peak. But I do remember feeling my Saturn return before Saturn even went into Aquarius. So when Saturn was in Capricorn, I was feeling it. And I think the reason for that is because I was at such an early degree of Saturn in Aquarius. I was at 0 degrees. I was at the very beginning. But it's interesting because even though I was at 0 degrees, it like entered Aquarius back in March, but it took that much time to get up to 32 minutes. So you had to realize it's a slow moving planet. It takes a long time for it to revolve around the sun. Therefore, it's going to stay in this sign a little bit longer. That's why you have to conserve your energy. But yeah, I do remember like around I was how old was I? I was in 2020. I don't know why I'm blanking right now, but I believe I was like 29. Yeah, I was 29. But I would have to say, like, when I was 27, I felt my Saturn return a little bit. It started to really, really like pronounce itself, like obviously like in 20, like when I was like 28. But like at 29, I already knew what was happening, and I was already a certified astrologist, so I was kind of like already prepared. But the good thing is you all are here right now. You're getting prepared like I was getting prepared like back in 2020, doing my certification program, and I was getting ready. I was learning, and I was understanding that restriction was going to come through during my life and all this different stuff. So anyway, Saturn takes about 2.5 years to transit every sign. Therefore, a human being has a Saturn return every 30 years, give or take. That means you could experience 3 Saturn returns in a lifetime. Now, Saturn really, really likes maturity. So the thing is that typically the first Saturn return is really, really intense, and it's a lot harder than the Saturn returns that follow, because you're still a child in your 20s. Even in your 30s you are. So it's going to be way more intense because you're going to like be transitioning, to, adulthood anyway. 20s are hard, and then when you transition from your 20s to your 30s, just taking away the Saturn return, you do notice such a difference. I mean, even the first half of your 20s, 20 to 25 versus 25 to 29, so different. And then once you finish out your Saturn return, you're like 31, 32. And it's like things are different. And it's because of this beautiful milestone called the Saturn return. So what does a Saturn return feel like? Okay, sometimes it feels like ripping off a Band-Aid. I will say that. Sometimes it feels like, you're in that car right there and you're randomly taking a weird exit and you thought that you were going to keep going straight. And then you're like, fuck, I need to take the exit. Sometimes it feels like that. It's also that wise whisper that you should always listen to. That person on your shoulder, or they're like, maybe you should do this. And you're like, no, I'm fine. And then you find out that you should have done that. So it's fuck around, find out. It's in your face. It will definitely, just kind of come out of nowhere, come out of the woodwork if you're really not doing the work. And like I said in the beginning, it's a time where you draw a line in the sand. And it's also a time when you're one step closer to your authenticity. That's my favorite thing to say on this slide, because when you go through a Saturn return, pre-Saturn return and post-Saturn return, I can tell you right now, you're way more authentic. You're way more you in the way that you were destined to be, because Saturn is all about fate and destiny. So when you're not acting in your authenticity, it is going to pull back that curtain, and it does not care if you're naked. Because it's like, if you're not actually acting like yourself, like, no, we are not meant to like come onto this earth and act like another person. Like, be you, because everyone else is taken. You have to be uniquely you. So really, there is no way out of a Saturn return. You have to go directly into it. And as a Scorpio, we love doing that shit. So I don't know if that's another reason why I enjoyed my Saturn return. But other planets that I feel like define your authenticity, I would have to say it's Saturn. Pluto is another one. Mars is another one. I think your moon is one, and Uranus as well, because that's like shock. And sometimes we just have to shake things up a little bit. But I would have to say Saturn takes the cake about defining who you are as a person, your authenticity. So wherever your Saturn is, I know, Leilani, what year are you born?
94.
94. Emily, what about you again?
99.
99. Okay. And 94, 99. Madeline, I think, is born, I don't know, but I know that
94 number.
Okay. Madeline's 94 as well. So I have a book right now. Okay. So 94, we have both. We have a little bit of Aquarius and Pisces, Saturn and Aquarius and Pisces, and then Emily, you have Saturn and Aries. So it's really important to kind of like understand not only what sign, but also where is your Saturn in your chart, because that will define a lot of that will actually not only help, but it will kind of explain like where that weak spot is. So I'll give an example. So I'll give you mine. So I'm Saturn in Aquarius and I'm in the first house. And Saturn being in Aquarius, we've talked a little bit about it. It's kind of rebellious, but Saturn itself is not rebellious. Saturn is like by the book. So when you put those two energies together, you can only imagine like I'm sorry. I have first of all, I have like a party going down the street and then like there's literally like I'm on the border of the Hasidic Jew neighborhood and they're like going up on a Tuesday right now. And it's really it's a lot of noise.
It's Purim. That's why. It's Purim.
Oh, okay. What is that exactly, Madeline? Can you please?
So it basically well, there's a story behind it, but it basically celebrates the Jews' liberation from Persia in the 5th century, where the dictator planned to expel and kill all the Jews.
Okay.
And Esther, who was the king's husband, who he didn't know was Jewish, bravely said, "I'm Jewish. If you're going to kill them, you're going to kill me too." And then the plan was thwarted, and then the Jews lived. So it's true. And it's in the month of Adar, and I'm taking Kabbalistic astrology. And in Kabbalah, the month of Pisces is Adar, and it's very important to have it at this time. I'll explain to you another time.
Yes. Okay, I love it. Madeline is so good about telling stories. She's a Sag, and we're gonna work together soon.
Can't wait.
I know, I'm excited. But okay, so great. So we know what's going on outside, and also like I think it's like really on brand as well because this is really interesting. I was kind of looking up what was going on like during Saturn in Aquarius and Saturn in Pisces, and then I'll kind of explain my like personal anecdote. But okay, so in 1965, which is when Saturn is in Pisces, there was this religious rise. And in 1965, the Catholic Church announced that Jews are not responsible for Jesus Christ's death. So like there was this like thing going on in the 1960s where I feel like I wasn't alive for it, but from what I'm picking up when I'm researching, it was like religious organizations and denominations were like calling each other out or taking accountability and responsibility, which is so on brand for Saturn during that time. And I feel like that more of that stuff is going to happen because oddly enough, when I was on a flight from St. Louis to New York, I was about to board and I saw this priest and I was like, I wonder if I'm going to sit next to this person. And I was like, and what do you know? Like we are sitting next to each other. And I was like, I have to say something. Like, I just have to. I mean, I grew up in like a Catholic area. St. Louis is a very Catholic town. There's also other religions, like Judaism is pretty popular in St. Louis as well. But I would say Catholic, most people are Catholic. So anyway, I starts to have this conversation with him. And you know, growing up when I was in Catholic grade school, I hated it. I thought it was so annoying. I didn't like my teachers. I didn't like the way they presented the information. But the way that this bishop, it wasn't a priest, it was a bishop, he was so good at like delivering his pitch that it got me thinking that there will be a rise to religion. And whether we do it or not, I think that people are going to rebrand themselves. The people that are in the religious organizations, they're going to rebrand themselves to get more people to sign on or to follow or whatever it is. And here's the thing, it's like, I went to, a private all-girls school. It was rooted in Catholicism. I took world religions and I did that for college credit before I went to Mizzou. And what I learned was just that, religion is good, but like if it's too much, it gets to the point where it's like there is a little bit of like, what's like, how are we really trying to like come together as one? And remember, Pisces is all about that. So we have to also like keep in the back of our mind, if we're ever getting, told to like maybe come into this group or like go to this thing, is that organization like really taking into account and welcoming like all different types of people? Because in my opinion, the God or the higher power or the universe or whatever I sign on to, for me, my God is all welcoming. Doesn't matter what color your skin is, who you love. Like, that's why I told my parents back when I was 12, I was like, I am not getting confirmed. I don't like what, the Old Testament says. And they were like, Kenzie, if you don't want to do that, you don't have to. And I was like, yes, Debbie and Tim, yes. Thank you. I was always about being real with my parents. And the good thing is they were real with me. But going back onto some of this stuff, I mean, like 1966, Kwanzaa was first celebrated. That's Saturn in Pisces. 1964, Nelson Mandela delivered "I'm Prepared to Die" speech. 1965, Bloody Sunday happened in Alabama with John Lewis. 1966, the Black Panther Party was founded. 1995, the Oklahoma City Federal Building was going to get bombed. And then in 1966, the Chinese Communist Party issued the May 16th notice. And that's kind of what really sparked the Vietnam War. My dad was in the Vietnam War. He was a Pathfinder. So he spent his 21st birthday over in Vietnam. And he was a part of the infantry that went into Cambodia when Nixon was saying that we weren't in Cambodia. They were. My dad was boots on the ground there. Being point as a Pathfinder. So there is just a lot of things that I found interesting when I was researching. And when it was in Aquarius, I mean, I talked a little bit about Zoom school. We had a lot of space travel, like Jeff Bezos, Richard Branson, and all. I think I'm saying his name right, but you know what I'm talking about. Another thing that I found really cool was like Home Depot recently announced that they're going to take their minimum wage up to $15. And that's like power to the people. That is so Saturn and Aquarius, like give more money to the people. And they're going to take a dip on their earnings, but like those are the companies that I feel like are going to continue to like do well and get talent to work at their companies. And then the next thing I want to talk about really quickly is that because Pisces is a water sign, and we're talking about humanitarian issues right now, and that's totally what we should talk about. We're humans, but I always like to think about planet Earth, and I don't like to forget her because she's Mama Earth, and she gives us this planet for us to live on. This, like we are a distinguished guest in her home. And so what I think might like come up is more talk about like our oceans and like what we're doing to protect them. And Leilani, like I feel like you could touch on this just because you were born in Hawaii and like you were around water that's like so precious. Whereas like for me, I'm from Missouri, I'm from St. Louis. I was around rivers, like I was around the Mississippi and the Missouri. But I mean, there is like the rivers are so low right now. Like when I was in France over the summer, it was kind of scary to see how low the rivers were. So I hope that more talk about the environment, especially the ocean and our, bodies of water is brought to the surface, and we talk more about that. What are we pouring into our bodies of water? What are we disposing in our bodies of water? What are we going to do with this plastic debacle where plastics are now in our bodies of water? They're at our beaches. Like we have, animals unfortunately like swallowing them. Emily and I talked about this. Like there was an alligator found in what's the park that's not Central Park?
Prospect Park.
Yeah, Prospect Park. There was an alligator found there, and it swallowed like plastic because there's so much plastic everywhere. Anyway, I talked a little bit more about, pharmaceutical companies I think are going to get into psychedelics. Now like magic mushrooms are getting more talked about, and like I just saw a post that there's these concepts of parties where there's no alcohol and it's just magic mushrooms and everybody takes them. And that's kind of what I mean on this slide about brain baths. Are we going to start to like be more open to that as a society, where we're going to be like, okay, like ketamine, like therapy, like, yeah, like we're gonna like be on board for that, versus, alcohol, which Madeline wrote a fantastic thing about the philosophy of looking at alcohol. And in general, alcohol at one point was, banned from society, but now it's like it's the number one drug of choice. And it a lot of the time it kind of leads to nowhere. I think moderation is key. Like I'm enjoying like some prosecco tonight, and I feel like I owe it to myself to do that. But like this like blackout culture, I don't think like people want to like spend their pastime like that anymore. I think people are more curious about like having nicer connections and like more thorough conversations and like creative conversations, and sometimes using drugs that are not alcohol, but like maybe like magic mushrooms, you can do that. Maybe if you suffer from PTSD, using stuff like that as well. So it'll be really interesting to see like what happens. I think that there's going to be a lot going on. And before like I kind of move into this slide, I just want to read really quickly what like the karma is associated with each Aquarius and Pisces, because this is really true. And I feel like for the people in the room that have a Saturn and Pisces, listen to what the karma is. But I'll share what the karma is for Aquarius, and I'll share like a personal anecdote really quickly, and then I'll move to Saturn and Pisces. So the karma for Aquarius pertains to previous rebellion and conflicts with authority. The karmic challenge is to keep the best from the past and letting go of the rest and evolving flexibility. So I'll be honest with you, I started to feel my Saturn return like around 27, 28. I was still working in the corporate world. And I have some coworkers on the call right now, and I think that they would have to say that I'm probably one of the most like easy people to work with. I would have to say that like I learned how to do that because I was in the corporate world and I pissed off so many people that it got to the point where it was like I had to learn that lesson. I was always speaking up. I was always pushing back. I was always like calling people out. And there was times where that was definitely needed, for sure, because I was bullied at some of my companies that I worked with, and I developed a course all about that. It's called Rise from the Ashes. But at times, you're not always right. So like the cancel culture really was born during Saturn and Aquarius, and it was very needed. And I'm very happy it's here. But sometimes it's not always the right route. And sometimes we have to kind of step back and all this stuff. So what I learned in my Saturn return, being in the first house, Saturn in Aquarius, rebellious, but there's restriction there because of Saturn. And then in the house of Aries, really, I mean, I found who I was, like my identity and like how I wanted to like really present myself as a person, because my ascendant is right there. And that's your vehicle that you're arriving in. And I learned how to stand up for myself. Aquarius rules ankles. And what can ankles do for us? It allows us to stand up. So I really was really learning important lessons of standing up, because before my Saturn return, I don't feel like I knew how to stand up for myself. And I really learned it during my Saturn return. So I'm very thankful for it. Now, that's my personal antidote. I hope you enjoyed it. Now I'm going to move to Saturn in Pisces, the karma. This is so interesting, and I really am excited for all the Saturn and Pisces to learn this, because this is so important, and like, what a beautiful lesson. Okay. Karma in the Piscean sphere centers around the sign's tendency to play the savior or victim, taking on atonement rather than at-one-ment. The karmic challenge is to learn to emphasize without taking on someone else's pain. So Pisces rules the feet. The feet, if you see on the slide, there's reflexology there. And you can have the whole human anatomy in the foot. And so I don't know if anyone listening has ever really gotten to know me, but I am into foot health like no other. I love my hokas. I like foot massages. I have things called yoga toes and correct toes, and like I put them on all the time when I'm in my house. And it's like I need a good stretch in my feet, and like I need to like stretch my feet on the regular, because like my whole body feels better when I do that. So why I'm bringing that up is that Pisces rules the feet, and in the feet we can feel everything. So maybe if we have an ailment going on in the liver, maybe if we use reflexology, we can help with that. And so just thinking about that in general, people that have Saturn and Pisces, they might take on problems that society are facing into their own world. So they're looking out in the outer world and they're like, is everything okay? And then they're coming back internally. And so that's what I felt like Kurt Cobain did. He really absorbed the problems that were going on in the world, and it was too much for him, especially because he became famous. It's kind of like Amy Winehouse. It was just too much for her. The fame was just way too much. And after working in the music industry and seeing the talent and how they're treated at times, especially somebody that is an empath, it is not a good situation at all. You are controlled and you really don't have any say in anything. And you feel kind of like alone. And there were many times where I was talking to celebrities and, I'm pitching them ideas and doing the things that I needed to do at my job, where in my head I was like, are you really like okay? Like, so it's just really important to like check in, especially with Saturn and Pisces. Hey, am I taking on like another person's emotions, or is this really my emotion? Because Pisces feels everything, and it's picking up on things that like other people do not see. And it's like kind of like a really, everything comes together, everything is one, everything is connected. And so you have to be really careful not to get lost in the sauce. I talk like that all the time with my little brother. He's a Pisces, just a sun in Pisces. And we talk a lot about getting lost in the sauce, and, just the best thing you can do when you're starting to feel getting lost in the sauce is to zoom out and just think about like a puzzle. What do we do when we do a puzzle? If we're getting really bogged down in the details and we're like, shit, where is this piece? I need to focus on this piece. The best thing you can do when you're working on a puzzle is to stop, go take a break, come back, look at the puzzle, and then what do you know? You find that piece and you put it in, and then the puzzle is complete. So Pisces is the missing puzzle piece to the zodiac wheel. So the crystal for Saturn is onyx, and the crystal for Pisces is amethyst. And so what I want you to do is, if you don't have these crystals already, if you maybe can, get them or just be around them, they're really great to work with. And really quickly, I want to read what Onyx does because I've talked about amethyst on my Instagram. So Onyx is strength giving, and it provides support in difficult or confusing circumstances and during times of enormous mental or physical stress. Centering your energy and aligning it with a higher power, accessing higher guidance is facilitated by Onyx, as is connection with the whole. It can take you forward to view the future, and with its capacity to impart personal strength, it facilitates being master of one's destiny. This stone promotes vigor, steadfastness, and stamina. I mean, that is very like, that's so Saturn. I can't even, that's really Saturn. So like, it's talking about being there for you during a hard time. So it's just, onyx is like a black stone right here. It's a really great one. And then amethyst is obviously this like purple crystal one. Okay, we talked about Pisces rules the feet, meaning that you can map out the entire anatomy of the human in a foot, reflexology, get a foot massage if it gets really tough. Pisces also rules the lymphatic system in the body. So using like gua sha and moving like all that stuff to the lymph nodes, that's a great ritual that you can kind of hone in during this time if you want to come up with a type of ritual. Or like a lymphatic drainage massage is also great as well. You know, be doing sound baths. Emily and I have talked about maybe going to sound baths together, taking real baths, and then maybe doing a brain bath if you really want to try that. Reiki, acupuncture, and hypnotherapy are also rituals that I feel like are really Piscean and that will help the Saturn and Pisces generation. You also want to spend time by bodies of water, not or water, especially rivers, because Pisces rules the river systems. And then you just want to be mindful of not losing yourself in creativity. Or sorry, not losing yourself in drugs or alcohol or other people's emotions, but trying to lose yourself in creativity. So try to find something that you really enjoy doing where it gets you kind of creative and you get your creative juices flowing. And then, you know, delve into spirituality, get curious on what what a higher power means to you. Also, get away from anything that is fake. Pisces despises this. It really, really makes them cringe. So if anyone or anything you're getting a fake vibe from it, get away from it. I can guarantee you that you will lose friends during this time. You will burn bridges that are leading to nowhere during this time. And it is okay to go through friend breakups, to go through breakups with intimate partners. Just in general, your whole landscape of who you know like keep around, it will change, and hopefully it will change for the better. You want to welcome that change that's knocking at the door and really, really prioritize sleep. Think about it. Pisces rules our dreams, and so when we're sleeping, and Madeline touches on this in her newsletter, we are really actually washing the brain and like really revitalizing it. And we can kind of go into the next task. So anyway, I'm looking at the time. It's 8:20. I'm really good on time right now, which typically I'm just not good on it. So I'm very proud of myself for doing on time. So we have 9 minutes left. I guess what I would like to do is just open it up to anybody that has questions. I'm happy to answer anything or just to talk freely about like what we talked about. And I'm gonna, I don't know, like, I guess like, I'm gonna turn it over to you all, especially the people, sorry if you hear this, especially the people with Saturn and Pisces, like, what do you feel like will be your Saturn return? Like, how do you think it will play out for you, and like what are you looking forward to, what's kind of like scary for you. If anybody wants to go ahead and start, we can spend like the next 9 minutes just talking freely, because I would really like to hear from people that have a natal Saturn in Pisces to talk about it, because you're the one that's leading this movement right now, so you're going to be the one that's most knowledgeable.
I can go. I feel like it's going to be a very inner spiritual experience. And I feel like I'm already on that path. Kind of, Kenzie, how you were saying before your Saturn return, you were feeling it, like before it actually, like I feel like I've been feeling it. So I'm excited, it's the wrong word, but I feel like because it slaps you with the lessons that you need to learn, I feel like I'm headed in that right direction. Like I don't feel like I'm going to be stripped down naked. My boyfriend Kenzie, which I just looked up, also has a Saturn in Pisces. Oh, sorry, Saturn in Aquarius, like you. And also like had like a lot of like in his job, like had a lot of like hard truths coming out during that time, where it's sort of humbled him, and he like pulled his pants down naked without, and I feel like for me, I don't know, I guess it depends on where you're going. I just feel like I hope I'm not going to be blinded by anything crazy, because I feel like I'm already on this journey.
I think that if you're already kind of feeling it and it's like day one of your Saturn return journey, I think that like honestly, it sounds like you have a good handle on it. But just remember, like in the beginning, we were talking about thinking about the wisest person and really kind of thinking and keeping that image in your head, because it will get lonely at times. Like I was saying, like there's gonna be like your landscape of who you hang out with and who you surround yourself with, where you spend your time is going to change. It's a very humbling thing, to say the least, your Saturn return. And I mean, it's kind of like, it's a good thing though, because there's so many people that we surround ourselves with sometimes that are not worth our time, and Saturn rules time, and Saturn wants to use your time the best way you can. So I don't know.
Yeah, I feel like I've been shedding friends for the past 6 months. Not like complete, like not in these like mean, terrible ways, but the thing that really resonated was Pisces doesn't like fake. And so I feel like I've just gotten clear on, it's interesting, the people who, I just feel like I've started germinating this process already thinking these things like, okay, who do I want to stay in my life? Whose values are aligning with me? Like what I find, like some of my newer friendships are more nurturing and some of my older ones are falling away. And I feel super like inside, and I'm a huge extrovert, but I feel like this journey is going to be an internal one. And I have been sleeping a ton and honoring sleep. So that's
good. Well, Leilani, do you want to say anything? Because you're kind of, when's your birthday again? Because you're kind of like December what?
28th.
December 28th, 1994.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna look that up really quickly, because I wonder, I just need to look this up. Okay. Talking about, or going off of what Madeline said about, like just what she was saying. The thing about your Saturn return is you're going to learn all these lessons, but then later you're going to be a teacher to other people in this area of life that you've mastered. It's weird how it works, but like before going into your Saturn return, you're going to be like, holy shit, I don't know how to do this. And then you're going to come out of it and you're going to learn those lessons. And it's kind of like those lessons that when you make a mistake and you're like, I'm never going to make that mistake again. And you just like, it's like imprinted on your head, it's tattooed on your head, and you're like, I'm never doing this again. It's tattooed on your brain, and you're like, no, that's not happening. Okay, so let's see. December 27th, 1994, right?
28th.
Okay. Okay, never mind. You're right. I was wrong. Saturn and Pisces. So, Leilani, do you want to speak about anything? Because you have a very interesting take because you're a mother.
Mm-hmm.
So I would love to hear what you have to say.
I feel super similarly to Madeline. Like, I feel like the last 6 months were very much like a preparation to now. And I feel like I was just telling Emily, I feel really comfortable, I think, because of my Capricorn and Scorpio placements, with like transformation and struggle and moving through them. So I'm really more just like excited for my Saturn return, I think.
Good.
Nice.
Yes, I love that. Okay. So,
I have a question.
yes, Emily.
What? I'm not going through my Saturn return right now, but like,
Mhm. So, what are you
should I
trying?
be preparing? Should I like prep for this?
No, I think that what you could do is you could look to where your chart, like bring up your natal chart, Emily,
Mm-hmm.
and we could look at where Pisces is in your chart because that's where Saturn will be hanging out. It's going to be hanging out for a while, right? So maybe if you wanted to get like if you wanted to come up with a pitch or you wanted to get inspired because I know you're in film, you could play like now that you have the knowledge that Saturn is in Pisces and you want to get creative, you could like maybe play to the Piscean things when it comes to film because actually like film and all that stuff is associated with Pisces, like fame is associated with Pisces and movies and all that stuff. So what I would do for you is I would actually just understand that Saturn is in Pisces right now. It's traversing the house that rules Pisces for you, whichever that is. You're a Taurus rising. So Pisces would be more in the top half of your chart versus the bottom. And so maybe it has to do, I don't know what house that's falling in, but in the top of my head, it's more outward facing. So like for you, what I would recommend is like trying to like maybe go to places that are Piscean or like work on jobs that are Piscean, get creative, use that. Also, when Saturn, when you don't have Saturn return, you have to realize that then the current transit is Saturn in Pisces. As Saturn moves through Pisces, it's moving from 0 degrees to 29 degrees. So what happens is if you have any other planets in like in Pisces, like let's say you have a Mars in Pisces and Saturn then is on top, the current Saturn is on top of your natal Mars, there might be restriction there of like how you can act because Mars is all about the planet of action. Maybe you have a natal Venus there. It's all about how you receive stuff. Maybe there's restriction on receiving stuff. So yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I was just saying my Jupiter is in Pisces. That's like the only.
Oh, okay. This is good.
What does that mean? What does Jupiter and Pisces mean?
So she is born with a natal Jupiter in Pisces. Okay, so Jupiter spends about a year in a sign where Saturn spends about 2.5 years because it's just the way the solar system is set up and how Jupiter's closer to the sun versus Saturn. When Saturn and Jupiter meet up, it's actually a very good thing. And Emily, I know that you're a Libra moon. It's a balancing act. So it's actually like creme de la creme in the zone, out of zone. We were laughing about that. I was talking about that all the time. But it's like we're working hard and we're seeing the fruits. So I think that actually is going to be a good time for you. You know, a lot of astrologists say when people that get connected and like let's say their Jupiter and their Saturn like are on top of each other, it's really good about making a deal, like a good deal, like it's like a good negotiation period, like all that stuff. So it's like I think it's a good thing. But also like it's just, you know, Jupiter is the planet of expansion, like it's ruled by Sagittarius. So it's like we're learning and like we want to just keep on traveling and we want to just like absorb all this culture and like take it all in and like, but it's like at times we have to slow down. And so Saturn is more of like, okay, we've had enough, like we're not going to get the third piece of chocolate cake, like we have had enough, Jupiter, like let's kind of recenter ourselves. So when we bring both of those planets together, it's the best of both worlds in my opinion. So I would look forward to that. Okay.
Go.
Go ahead, Emily.
No, you go.
No, Miss Quintero, go ahead. You have the floor.
I was just gonna say, what is it like? What do the houses mean?
Okay, so the houses are what brings astrology down to earth. Okay, so we have to realize that when we're using natal astrology, we're looking at the solar system, right? Because we're looking at the snapshot of the sky when we're born. We're trying to understand like how do we connect to these planets in our solar system. And because we're the only life form in our solar system, we have to understand that we're looking at things from Earth's perspective. We forget planet Earth. In general, we just forget. As humans, we forget that we are on this beautiful planet that provides us all this stuff. So what the houses do is they bring things back down to reality in human form. And so houses 1 through 12 coordinate with all the 12 zodiac signs. House 1 starts off the zodiac wheel, the natal birth chart. It's about infancy. But 12 is the last house, and it's about literally transitioning from the physical realm to the spiritual realm. So if you think about it, going from house 1 to 12, if we think about that's a whole life, it's a whole human life. And as we go through certain periods, like the 4th house has to deal with home life, and when we're like really little and we're living with mom and dad, that's kind of the period of our life. Like we go to school and like everything's taken care of. Mom and dad buy the food and like all we have to do is literally watch Rugrats. That's house 4. When we get to house 7, we might have our first intimate relationship. We might get married. In house 8, when we get married, we take on people's assets. We maybe take their last name. We take on their like we take on more than just being in a fun, flirty relationship. Like we're taking on the skeletons in the closet. That's why Scorpio rules that house. Sex is also there as well, inheritance. 10, that's house of Capricorn. That's, when we go out in the world and we find our career. 11 is more like towards the later years of our life. Maybe we're in retirement. We find a community that finally like speaks to our soul. Like you find our tribe, right? Our grandmas and grandpas that are like living their best life and they're retired, that type of thing. So houses 1 through 12, they all have like a season of life. But obviously we don't spend our whole life being an infant. So when I had my Saturn return in my first house, I felt like I had to revisit how I was defining myself as a person. I can tell you right now, you know me right now, Emily, and you're like, you've given me compliments. I love them. And I'm like, thank you so much. But I can tell you right now, when I was your age, I was nothing like this. I had no confidence. Like I didn't really like know how to like sell myself or be myself, or like I was just trying to like do all these things that were not me. And it's just like that's kind of like, even though the first house is related to infancy, I felt like I was in infancy in my middle 20s because I was like hanging out with the wrong crowds of people, like doing a lot of things that I shouldn't have been doing. And I had to really start from scratch. And that was like an infancy period of my life, even though I was in my 20s. So it's like thinking about things in that way. We have to take it literally, but we also have to take it figuratively. And so the houses allow us to really take what's going up in the sky and bring it back down to earth. So like Saturn and Pisces, we have the Rolling Stones talking about like all the stuff that was going on. It was like really fucked up shit. Like people were getting assassinated left and right. And they're like, it's like we're like oh my god, this is so like awful, but we're like we're the ones that are doing this, like we're the ones. And Pisces is all about self undoing. And it was like that song Sympathy for the Devil was basically comparing Jesus to Lucifer and explaining that they are in the same vein, that they are not really different, that all sinners are saints, all saints are sinners, all cops are criminals, like all that stuff. And it's like that's Pisces. That's like the fact that like Pisces is the sign that is like, I don't care what color you are, I don't care who you love, I don't care what country you're from, I don't care what religion you practice. It's like we are all the same. And once the human collective can get to a point where we actually work together as a unit, we're never gonna figure shit out. And hopefully, I think that I feel it in a way where I feel like there's more people being like, just because you do this doesn't mean you're a good person. Like, and it's going to be so interesting because the next presidential election in the United States is going to be when Saturn is in Pisces. And I'm already feeling like both parties are going to start calling each other out. And maybe there will be a rise for a new party that's more what we need. We need certain things, and we're not getting them from the parties. I got an A in political science. I love political science. I love talking politics and astrology. It's probably the best cocktail that you could ever sip on. And I just really think that there's going to be something really different going on in this next presidential election. I mean, Pluto will be in Aquarius, Saturn will be in Pisces. It'll be really, really interesting. I really hope that like we will start figuring stuff out, because to be honest with you, I'm more concerned about our planet versus like, I think that we have a lot of things to do as humans, but I'm more concerned about our planet. What really, for me, that was like kind of like a wake up was the earthquakes. Like that was like really sad to see. And I feel like more of that is going to happen if we don't take into account what we do as humans. But that's just my opinion, right? I'm not the person that knows all the answers. Anyone else have any other questions? Because before we leave, we're going to do a quick little thing to kind of like center ourselves. And I want you to maybe use this as a ritual when stuff gets tough, just like picturing the wisest person of your life. But any other questions? Okay.
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
So my boyfriend has your Saturn, like you're 1992.
I'm 91.
What?
But
91.
92?
He's 92. But so what about the people in between us? Like, what about the people a year above me?
Like
does that mean
93?
Yeah. Where would their Saturn return be?
So what happens is, like, for instance, Saturn, like, obviously goes through a retrograde. So, like, it's going to be moving backwards in degrees when it's doing that. So then what happens is it then, like, will have to, like, repeat itself, retrace its steps, and it will go forward. So some periods are like, for instance, like in 1993, up until like, for instance, like I know a girl that's going to be turning 30 in June, and she's June like 20, I think 27th or 25th of 1993. So she'll be turning 30 this year. And she's Saturn in Pisces, but like 5 days later, if she was born 5 days later, she'd be Saturn in Aries. And it just depends, because it depends on the retrograde, and the retrograde happens more frequently, or sorry, not more frequently, more longer, because it's a planet that's farther out. It's a generational planet. So the way that you can learn is, I'll just, for instance, I'm going to give you all a resource because you are all curious, and it's good to share this knowledge. I love this website. It's called Cafe Astrology. It's really good, and I recommend it to people all the time. But this is showing Saturn through the signs, the dates. And so, like, it's talking about, I'm trying to think, I'm going down to 93. So Saturn in Aquarius is February 6th, 1991 to 1993. But then Saturn in Pisces is May 21st, 1993 to June 30th, 1993. But then we have Saturn in Aries. It doesn't say, but when I pulled it up, like, for instance, I wanted to like think about that because I knew that it was going to come up, but June 23rd, 2023. Or 1993. This is a good resource, but at the same time, people make mistakes. It's okay. But okay, so actually July 2nd of 1993, like, so anybody that was born in July of 1993, their Saturn return was actually in Aquarius. And that go there because Saturn is retrograde. So even into August and September, it's Saturn in Aquarius. October 1993, and then in November of 1993, it finally goes direct, and it starts moving forward again. And then by February of 1994, it's back in Pisces. So it spent a little time, like a little field trip in Aquarius in 1993. And it will do the same thing, like, while Saturn is in Pisces this time. But for instance, where is it? But I had it on the slide. But for instance, like on May 21st, or sorry. On May 24th, 2025. So that's literally 2 years from now, but we're talking about that. Saturn moves into Aries. So Emily, actually, like, there's a little bit of a preview of your Saturn return in 2025. But then what happens is then, it goes through the, retrograde. It's in Aries. It's having a field trip in Aries, and then it goes back into Pisces. It goes back into Pisces in October of 2025, and then it gets out of retrograde in December of 2025, and it finishes out its tenure in Pisces in 2026, February 2026. So that happens every time, you know, Saturn does go into like a sign. But anyway, that's pretty much it. Before we leave, what I really want to do is just say this mantra out loud. It's an affirmation that I learned from like awakened breath work, and I think it's a really great thing. And even if you have to leave, that's totally fine. I see Leilani and them have to leave. That's totally cool. Do what you need to do. But I'll send the replay out. That way you all have this. You can give it to people or you can watch it again. But basically, this is really an amazing thing to say when you're going through your Saturn return, is to work with breath work in general, but also to say these things that I'm about to say. And Lucas Mack of Awaken Breathwork, he's from New Zealand. He's the one that chimed these things, but I think they're really good, and I made one for myself for this mastermind. But if everybody wants to take a deep breath in, close your eyes, hold it at the top, and I'm going to start to read some of these affirmations, and then we'll go ahead and close out tonight. So if you want to go ahead and repeat this out loud or repeat it to yourself, that's totally fine. But just focusing on your breath, in through the nose, out through the mouth, and just listening to my words. I am exactly who I am meant to be in this moment. I lovingly embrace my fears. I am fierce and strong and courageous. I welcome in the needed change. And so that's how we're going to close out this mastermind. I'm really, really happy that Leilani, Emily, Madeline all could be here. And I'm really looking forward to people that can catch the replay. But it was so fun to have you all here and to kind of hear your experience. And I'm really, really looking forward to this new era. This is a brand new era for the whole collective. And for the people that have Saturn and Pisces, you're the ones that are, you know, guiding us. So it will be really interesting to know how you feel like after this all transpires. And if you ever want to reach out and just talk about it, I'm totally for that, and I'm welcome to those conversations. But thank you so much for joining. And once this is all done, I'm going to send out the replay, and you all will have it, and you can refer back to it. But thank you again, and I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.